On Tuesday, the 24th of June, the Honourable Premier of Montserrat, Mr. Reuben Meade, visited the studios of ZJB, where he was interviewed live on air by senior announcer Basil Chambers. Their wide-ranging conversation covered everything from the Premier's recent multi-destination overseas trip to the ongoing and planned redevelopment projects for Montserrat, the upcoming elections, and more. It lasted a little over an hour. If you missed it, here it is again.
The Honourable Premier of Montserrat, the Honourable Reuben Meade.
Good day, Basil. Good day, listening public, wherever you are. Just in the house to have a little chit-chat with Basil on just a few issues, a range of issues, and reporting on my recent multi-city stop over a 10-day period, which is more hectic than I thought. But it's just an indication of a sign of age.
Indeed. So take us a little peek back and let us know what you've been doing, for the past 2 weeks?
Okay. First of all, I was invited by the Montserrat Aspirers of Boston to their 40th anniversary celebrations and award ceremony. The basic theme was to bring the Montserratians there up to speed in terms of what was happening in Montserrat from a Montserrat development standpoint, and also looking at the way forward. The attendance there was remarkable. I was very, very pleased with the attendance, and the response to what we're doing in Montserrat also was very positive. There are two clips that I left with them. One was a clip of the port, because there still has been some misunderstanding in terms of what the port is supposed to look like. And the second one was the hospital in terms of its overall layout. We're able to have private discussions after with one or two of the others to be able to go into a little more detail. From there, went across to London, where I met with Minister Alan Duncan of DFID and also officials from the Foreign Office in two separate meetings. Within DFID, we're basically speaking about the funding for geothermal to take it to the final stage. We are at a point where we should be in a position to move beyond where we are, still looking at the 3-year time frame, and the 3 years is my timeline and not that of the British. The technical people are looking more at 2 years, but I always put in slack time because things will go wrong somewhere along the line. So you don't want to get people's expectations up too early, but basically looking at a 3-year time frame. The funding proposals which we're looking at, we're still working out the details, and we're hoping that we'll be in a position to sign off on those details by September, by the end of August, basically when the House goes in recess in the UK. One of the reasons why we need to get quite a number of these things up and going is because, like us, they also have a timeline in that elections in the UK will be in May of next year, and we therefore need to be able to sign off on a lot of things before the ministers go into election mode in the United Kingdom. You know, once they're into election mode, that's it. It's very difficult for you to have ministerial intervention while they're in election mode. So that is where we are with that. We also spoke in terms of the port and where we are with Dubai ports and the other developments there. They're very pleased with the state at which we are at. We've indicated to them basically that the additional information which the MDC is supposed to be providing to the potential investors in Dubai will be submitted to them within a month or month and a half. And then it will require a further visit sometime in October, maybe November, to basically sign off on the next stage. Because clearly, as you're looking at a project that is as large as it is, one has got to spend a lot more time. The numbers have to work out. But there's still that commitment from HMG in terms of providing the kind of financial support which they had indicated earlier. Meetings with the Foreign Office officials basically was, as I put it, a harvesting meeting, where we were just basically sharing ideas in terms of what the JMC, that's the Joint Ministerial Council, will look like. They would like for us to provide for them some responses very early. So part of the remit which I've been given is that the meeting in Cayman Islands, which will take place in the middle of July, that I should then put a few things on the table so that we bring the discussion down to about 4 major items rather than just having a general discussion. And also reinforcing the commitment of HMG in terms of ensuring that the Joint Ministerial Council is in fact productive. From there we went across to Valencia, Spain, to a little place called Montserrat. Very beautiful little part of Spain. It just shows that I need to brush up on my Spanish. I was hosted by the mayor. Mrs. Grinner was hosted by the third deputy. So we stayed in their homes. The discussions there were looking at how can we, within any memorandum of understanding which we have, look at what benefits that they can provide for us and what benefits we can provide for them. So it's a mutual thing. I brought back with me 2 bottles of stuff that has the name Montserrat on it. In fine print it says, it has Montserrat in bold print. In fine print it has Valencia, Spain. Mm-hmm. So we can in fact try to import some of those products here, which will also go very well on the local market. So we're looking at a trade relationship from that point of view. We're also looking at the cultural exchanges. There are a couple EU programs that we're not too familiar with, because the EU programs tend to be very complicated in terms of how you can draw down things from them. And we're looking to work with them because they have utilized some of those programs already, where we can get some of our students going off on maybe 1-year training exercises in another European country, which will be funded by the European Union. So they have the experience in the university in Valencia, so therefore we will also be able to look at that. From there we went back to London, had meetings with the Montserratians in Tottenham, a meeting in Tottenham. Again, it was an open discussion in terms of what's happening in Montserrat from our perspective. But when we have meetings of that nature, as I say to them, I'm more here to respond to questions which they may have rather than just talking to them. So where some people will say it's the same old rhetoric, it is what the people ask for that we've been able to respond to. So we dealt with a whole range of issues, one of which kept cropping up was what is being offered to the returning Montserratians. We have a cabinet paper which will be discussed in terms of collapsing a lot of those things in one document, and we're hoping to be in a position to send that document in email form to all of the Montserrat associations, and they in turn can redistribute them amongst them, their members, other interested Montserratians. We'll expect, of course, that the Facebook crowd and the Twitter crowd will also be using Twitter and Facebook to promulgate that. From there, we went on the following day to another town where we looked at signing a memorandum of understanding. That memorandum of understanding was in fact signed. One of the first things we've indicated to them that we need to look at is the pharmaceutical procurement for Montserrat, because we've had lots of complaints in terms of the quality of medication in relation to what we're offering our patients here as against what's on the NHS formulary. So we're now looking at working with them. As I've indicated to them, the volume which we're utilizing in Montserrat is the amount that falls off the back of a truck on an average day. Because their population is 1-point-something million, and we have a population of 5,000. So therefore, the requirements of Montserrat are relatively small. The councillors have agreed as soon as we send their formulary across to them, they will start putting something in train. The other elements we're looking at is, again, technical assistance, both in terms of the sporting, and you see that their team was playing against a team, the MCC, where Brian Lara scored a quick little half-century. Still looking good. So we're looking at sports, we're looking at teacher education, we're looking at training for our doctors and our nurses, so we can do short-term assignments there. And we're also looking at how they can help us, as I said, on the sporting side, where they can take our students, say our young cricketers, and put them in the academy, and see whether or not they can fit into their overall team. So overall, it was a rather hectic trip. I think is the first trip that I did, where when I got back here, I had to take a complete day just to crash out, because time was catching up on me. It was 5 cities basically in 10 days. So you're spending a lot of time traveling, late nights, and so forth. So that's basically it. On the way back, clearly I had to stop off in Antigua. I took the opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda for a few minutes, where we discussed, among other things, the charge which was put on at the ferry terminal. So that one was discussed. We looked at some of the OECS issues that he has to deal with, some of the CARICOM issues, and in fact some of the banking issues, which are so important to all of us because our banking system is integrated. It's an EC dollar. So any weakness in one area of our banking system can in fact collapse the entire EC dollar. So those are some of the issues. We've exchanged numbers, so we'll be in a position to have a chit-chat back and forth. I'll be in Antigua for the CARICOM heads meeting, 1st to 4th of July, and by which time we'll be in a position to be able to work out the arrangements. We expect to have a letter going back to him between today and tomorrow, so that we're formalizing the request to take that tax back off. And also looking at the taxes at the airport as well. We need to be able to rationalize that. There's also another product which we're exporting to Antigua, which is not being treated very fairly, and that is our sand and aggregate exports to Antigua, where the charges are very high at the port, and it therefore makes our product very uncompetitive in Antigua, although the demand is there for it. Mm-hmm. So all of these, among a host of other things which we'll discuss. We've also agreed to continue the relationship which we had with the previous government in terms of Montserrat, Antigua, Barbuda, working more closely in terms of how we can integrate these 3 countries so that there's seamless travel, there's seamless movement, there's less hassle here and there, so that we can in fact look at how we can jointly develop both of the communities. So that basically covers the past 10 days overseas.
Okay, Mr. Premier, you just mentioned your trip to Boston. I know that you've been to New York, and I think that you might be invited there later on this year again. How important is the diaspora to Montserrat? I know that there are feelings outside of Montserrat, by people living outside of Montserrat, that maybe they're not loved enough by us who live here,
Well, I tend to make a statement to the diaspora when I go to them. One is that we offer a range of incentives to them if they opt to come back. The second element is that when we're looking at job opportunities in Montserrat, despite the fact that 1 or 2 may have made submissions for job placements here and they have not been successful, does not mean that they cannot continue, because how much does it cost you to put your CV online, submit your job applications? But we also have to look at the system which we use in Montserrat, in that sometimes we ourselves, in terms of those who make the decisions in terms of employment, tend not to look as favorably at Montserratians, their own Montserratians, as we would like them to do. Now, the Public Administration Bill makes that very clear, in that Montserratians must be given priority in all forms of employment opportunities. So that will be in legislation. The other element is that we are a very difficult country when we look at even our own diaspora people. I spoke to a young man on Sunday when I came in, and he said to me, he is back here on vacation, but people are telling him that he jumped ship and he abandoned ship. But we need to be more open to our friends when they come in. We must welcome them. We're welcoming people. So don't see our Montserratians who had to go overseas for a range of reasons, one of which is volcanic, that in fact when they come back, we can't appreciate them. The other element is that quite a number of our diaspora Montserratians have been trained in a range of fields and a range of areas, and we must also give them an opportunity to come back and contribute if they so desire. But part of it is that we have to look at what are the comparative salaries that are available. Now, someone working in the United Kingdom and working for, let's say, £20,000 or £24,000 a year, as the case might be, they can't very well be coming and saying, well, you have to pay me the equivalent of £24,000. because we have to now deal with it in terms of what it is that we can afford to pay. Yes, if it is being funded through technical cooperation funds, then you're paid international salaries and international wages. Some of those job offers are in fact available, and they should be able to apply for them. The other thing too is the engagement and the expectation. What it is that the diaspora Montserrat wants. And that is part of what we've been saying to them. What it is that you want. Are some of your wants and wishes reasonable in relation to those of us here in Montserrat? Now, you don't expect to come and you get the kitchen sink and the whole house. When the Montserratian who is living here, who is waiting in line for a house or housing loan, that you will get ahead of the queue simply because you're a diaspora Montserratian and we want you to come home. But we also have to look within our own banking system. That someone who is retired in the United Kingdom, for example, we must not turn down their application for a loan simply on the basis of age. We also have to look at their ability to repay, because sometimes their pension and social security benefits are sufficient for them to create a mortgage here in Montserrat. And we also have to look at the flexibility in terms of how we can deal with some of those.
Let me just come and ask you this question. You mentioned, I think, the cabinet paper a little while ago, and my question is, what is in that cabinet paper that you mentioned regarding diaspora initiatives?
No, part of it is when you're looking at a returning Montserratian, what it is that is being offered. Now, we have a range of SRNOs that deals with the returning Montserratians. We're now seeking to consolidate those. There's a question in terms of some charges, and we also have to look at how do we validate those charges so that you're not putting in the way stumbling blocks when somebody is bringing in their stuff coming back in. There's also another one which we're looking at in terms of if a Montserratian wishes to come back and build a house, but they're bringing in all of their financial resources. In other words, they're not coming into the bank and using Montserrat money to finance their house, then we're seeking to say to them, and I'm hoping that my colleagues will support it, is that if they're bringing in 100% of their money, then let's treat it as a foreign investment which they could have made in Miami or Birmingham or London or someplace, and then all of the products for their building will come in duty-free because it's new money coming in. It's not affecting our financial system here in a negative way in that they're actually bringing in money. What items are they entitled to bring in? What's the time frame for bringing in those items? When we had introduced this legislation back in the early 90s, it gave them a 6-month period. Now we're saying you'll have up to a 3-year period to make up your mind whether or not you're staying. So you may come in 2014, but you can have your benefit up to 2017, which is one of the proposals. Because you may come, you're not too sure whether or not you're going to make it in Montserrat. So why bring the things in and then you're not certain? You cannot also build a house within a very short period of time, so it takes time for you to build your house and furnish your house. So these are some of the things which we're fine-tuning so that we can make those offers in a formal way once the paper is ratified and agreed.
So how do you feel about maybe going that extra mile and instituting maybe a Minister of Diaspora Affairs?
Well, remember in 2009 when we got into office, one of the parliamentary secretaries was in fact assigned Diaspora Affairs. Now, Diaspora fits within the ministry of the Office of the Premier. So there is a formal ministerial allocation for it. But we need to have somebody of sufficient competence to be in a position to take that forward. Because when you send somebody overseas and the people are saying, hang on a while, you're not sending me the right person to represent. They're not willing to bring over their views and they cannot respond to questions. So then what's the point? So which is why in a lot of these areas, I am being forced to attend these functions when in fact it should have been a parliamentary secretary. We lost that parliamentary secretary. One, I'm not going to say for incompetence, but he was not in a position to fulfill the role. Therefore, within the next dispensation, we're hoping to be able to have somebody more competent so that they can go out and handle the diaspora affairs without me having to be peeping over their shoulder and managing things for them.
Okay. So as we look forward now into 2014 elections just around the corner, where do you sit now as Premier of Montserrat? I mean, how comfortable are you with how things have gone, let's say, maybe since you've announced that, hey, this is the date? I mean, a lot of people didn't even realize that September 12th will be polling day. And now you can see that there's a bit more activity happening. But in your own spirit, how happy are you with how things have gone or how things are going?
Let me put it this way, rather than addressing it from an election standpoint. When you're building a house, you have to start with the foundation. You can't buy the furniture before you at least have your windows and your doors sorted out. Given the state that Montserrat economy was in 2009, we had to now change the focus from just building houses and looking at welfare issues and looking more at the developmental issues. So hence you saw a lot more in terms of permanent infrastructure being put in place, more of permanent buildings, the development issues that we've been addressing, the fiscal incentives that are required to get investors in, and in fact going out there and looking for investors. Now let's take, for example, the airport. We hear a lot of grief being thrown around about the airport being less than what was desired and we therefore need to have a new airport. But this is what the government of the day was willing to accept. In like manner, we were being offered £23 million to create a breakwater around the little jetty which we have down there. In my view, this government took a very firm decision that despite the fact that it was an offer on the table, that we should be bold enough to say, sorry, that is not sufficiently developmental, even if we are to lose the money. Don't spend money simply because it's there to be spent. And therefore, because of the position which we've taken, the British government has said, okay, let's hear what your views and opinions are on it. We're willing to listen to you. And they're now saying, we trust your judgment. Go ahead out and see if you can find the foreign investors. And we have given ourselves a time frame for finding those foreign investors so that we can source that £23 million back from the British government. So these are things which are being done in terms of building a proper foundation. We're filling in the Pipers Pond area and rechanneling the watercourse and replanting the trees that grow in those wetland areas. But people have been saying, why are you filling in that area? We have to look at how we can enhance Montserrat and enhance the development. The fact that we've been able to go out and source a foreign investor who is saying, I like the policies of government of Montserrat, I have confidence in dealing with the Premier when he comes to talk to us and his team, and therefore I am willing to make that investment. The gentleman is coming here the end of July. As he's indicated, I'm coming to see where we are and to take the project forward, but I'm not signing any agreement until I know what government you're going to have in place. So whereas we're putting a commencement date for December, January for construction, a lot is going to impinge on what you're doing in relation to who will be in government. The other element here is that looking at the geothermal, a few years ago people were saying they can provide geothermal in 18 months. And we're saying you cannot provide geothermal in 18 months. We have stuck the course. We have drilled 2 wells. There's a requirement for a 3rd well. We have the funding for the drilling of the 3rd well, so we'll be going to tender for that. And we have an agreement in principle for the financing of everything beyond that to the production of power coming from geothermal. So we're expecting within the framework document a 3-year timeline for the development and generation of geothermal power. In relation to sports and a whole heap of the other policies, you have seen the developments which we've had in terms of sports, in terms of health and the healthcare system, new hospital coming on stream, new training of nurses, training of medical personnel, including training of technicians. We're also looking, and we've looked at the welfare program, where I understand that there are some persons who are saying, oh, Reuben Meade don't know how to negotiate for money. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we get in there, we're going to give you $1,500 a month or $1,400 a month as welfare payments. And the question which we ask is, how reasonable and realistic is that? We have offered something similar, because I think it's something which we can negotiate, and we're still working on the numbers, where we're saying for welfare recipients, the persons who cannot feed themselves, we will provide for them meals 7 days a week. Saturdays, Sundays, every day of the week, and public holidays. 365, 366 days of the year. But for those individuals who are in a position to do some little thing, picking up bottles on the side of the street, cleaning the drains, doing some of these little mundane things, maybe an hour, 2 hours a day, maybe 2 days a week, so that we can provide them with something to be able to take them up to a higher level. So these are things that are there in terms of policy. The other element that we have to look at is one in relation to the toilet programs and the bathroom programs, where we have sourced funds from the British government to do that. So it's a whole package of things which we're doing in relation to doing what we promised the people to do over a 5-year period. Come election day, then people will have to judge us on the basis of whether or not this team, led by myself, will provide for you the policies, the framework, the work in progress and the work in train to be able to move things forward and bring the development which Montserrat expects. We have built the foundation. We're now taking it to completion stage, which is why we would require an additional 5-year period to do that.
I've got a few questions here for you, and I'm going to tie this one in. So I'm going to make it a two-part question. So with the port development, are you confident that Dubai Ports will come on board to develop the port at Carl's Bay as planned? That's one. And the second part is, what does Dubai Port requires in return for such a massive investment?
Okay, let me respond to it this way. And sometimes people say I skirt around a question, but let's respond to it this way. The British government is willing to offer us £23 million to protect the little jetty which we have. Is that what we want? We will not be in a position to get grant funding from the British government to do the port which we require. Similar to the airport, we accepted something and we're complaining about it. Dubai Ports will be looking at it as a financial venture. Now, the funding from the British government will do two things. One, it will protect the local port, and let's call it local port for the time being, and I'll explain, where the products which are coming in for the use of Montserrat will come in at rates that are established by the government of Montserrat. The products which we're exporting will be set at rates determined by the government of Montserrat. So we're protecting that local element. However, the cruise ships that we're expecting to come in, the port operator will then be able to charge, and government will get a portion of that. The second element is that the passengers are not coming in to the operator of the port. They're coming into Montserrat, which means your taxi drivers, your people who are selling your souvenir items, the people who are selling drinks, and your restaurateurs, they will be making money. And the whole idea is to get people to come into Montserrat. The yachting fraternity, who will be using the internal part of that, again, those rates will be established. So you're looking at what we call a public-private partnership. So in effect, you're taking a loan from Dubai Ports, and they will pay themselves back from the charges which they levy on transshipment of containers, which is part of what we're looking at, the cruise ship facility, and also your yachting facility. So that is basically what will happen. It may mean that the port, from a private standpoint, will be run for maybe a 15, 20, or 30-year period, but at least it will be a port that is futuristic enough to look at the developments of Montserrat. Now, the question is, and I think this is in the back of some people's mind, so you're selling out Montserrat. I wish to just put it in this context. Dubai Ports has one of your major ports, has invested in one of your major ports, and controls a major port in the United Kingdom, in London. It also controls ports in the United States, which they own and manage. They own the major port in the Dominican Republic and also in Suriname. So it's not that you're giving up. You must be able to make an investment decision which will be in the best interest of the people of Montserrat.
And so the question is, Mr. Premier, the port will be foreign owned. Is that what you're saying? If Dubai ports, come on board?
Let's put it this way. The management of the port will involve a private sector operator. So Dubai Ports, in fact, will operate the port. But as it relates to the local elements, and this is the point which I try to get across, the local elements of your port, which is the importation of your flour and your lumber and your cement and your whatever, those are under control of the government of Montserrat and not by the foreign operator. But it's a business concept that is being developed in the region. It's not the first. Montserrat will not be the first who are doing it. But if you can't get it, are we saying that we will go without a port and we'll operate something substandard until somebody provides us with the money to do something else? And we're saying no, we need to have something which will assist us in the development of Montserrat, and therefore these are some of the initiatives which are being taken to do that.
Folks, just in case you're wondering, I'm having a quick chat with the Honourable Premier of Montserrat, Mr. Reuben Meade. Will geothermal mean cheaper electricity rates for locals? Is that a given, or will any development cost incur to build like a plant, etc., be passed on to Montserratians?
Well, part of what we've been very, very careful about is that we are not involving the private sector in financing geothermal. So it's a government facility. Thus far, we've been able to utilize grant funds. We have reiterated and we've stated over and over again that we are looking at a reduction in the cost of electricity by as much as 30%. And that is what the numbers are showing. Even if we have to take a soft loan to be able to develop the rest of the facility, it will not impact on that rate going to the consumer.
Okay, I want us to go back a little bit to your trip.
But let me just take that a little further.
Yeah, go ahead.
As it stands now, we're importing in the vicinity of about $10 million worth of diesel for the generation of electricity in Montserrat. That's 10 million divided by 5,000 persons. You notice what it's costing. The geothermal facility will then wipe out the need for that $10 million foreign spend in terms of diesel for the generation of power. Because geothermal will be more efficient and the capital cost will be borne by government on behalf of the people, then the returns will go to the people of Montserrat. And I want to make that abundantly clear, and it is one of the reasons why we're saying, even to some of the local persons who are saying they can finance geothermal, we are keeping it 100% in government so that the people of Montserrat get 100% of the benefit.
Okay. You did mention that yourself and Mrs. Greenaway, you both were in Spain the other day. Will these people in Spain, come to Montserrat? Will we get a revisit by them to strengthen this bond, as you mentioned?
The mayor and a grouping have already indicated that they would love to come to Montserrat. The question is, what's the timeline? And we're suggesting perhaps in March, during St. Patrick's, when you have a week of activities. And we can possibly even bring in some musicians coming in so that they can participate in the week of activities in July, St. Patrick's week. So yes, there already is a commitment to that. And there's also a commitment to them shipping some Montserrat products to Montserrat in Montserrat. So from Montserrat, Spain to Montserrat in Montserrat. So there's also that trading link that we're also seeking to establish. But remember, when we did the Memorandum of Understanding with India, people were saying, well, why are you signing an MOU with India? What is going to be the benefit? We have seen quite a number of Montserratians having gone to India for training, come back and have made greater contributions in Montserrat.
Okay. A question. How much cash does the Bank of Montserrat have on its books? And are they, for instance, being looked at to invest in Montserrat's redevelopment drive?
In terms of what the cash position is in Bank of Montserrat, that is a matter for Bank of Montserrat. Government of Montserrat, although a major shareholder, cannot disclose certain confidential information in banking. There will be an annual general meeting of Bank of Montserrat, I think, on Wednesday evening. And therefore, those are questions which persons who own shares in Bank of Montserrat can in fact come to the annual general meeting and ask those questions. So that the management of Bank of Montserrat, the board of directors and management can in fact respond to those questions. But it's not a question that I can answer on here.
Okay. When will the people of Montserrat see the contents of the MOUs that were signed with Spain and Hertfordshire?
The Hertfordshire MOU is already up online, and therefore if persons wish to read it, just go to gov.ms and read it. If it's not there, it will definitely be up by the end of this week. The one with Spain, that will go up. We have just come back, so you don't expect that an MOU will in fact go up online as soon as you sign it. That is not the way government works. It has to go through the cabinet. It has to go through certain procedures before it's published. Now, some people will say, but we want to know what's in it before you put it up. Suppose something that we don't like. That is why you hire a management team. The management team don't go back and ask the shareholders, what should we do? If they have to do that, then you have the wrong management team in place. So you have to trust the management team you have, that they are in fact looking out for the best interests. And once we have come to the agreements, then we publish those. The MOU for India should also be up online, so it's nothing that is private.
Okay. Honourable Premier, for a moment, I want you to just touch on the agriculture sector here on Montserrat and our ability to feed ourselves. And maybe you can tie that in with our road project as we move on. I think a lot of people, somebody is actually worried. Are we actually able to feed ourselves?
We are not 100% able to feed ourselves, and we must also remember that we are a recovering farming community. And let's just take ourselves back a few years, because sometimes you have to look back in order to look forward. There are farmers who had put in crops over the years, and just at the point when they're ready to harvest their crops, down comes a major ashfall and wipes out their agricultural production.
Wow.
The lands in the north are not as generous or as productive as the lands in Gauges and parts of the world that you come from. Mm-hmm. So we now have to look at ways and means of redeveloping. When I was Minister for Agriculture, we brought in some tissue culture, bananas and plantains, and pineapples from St. Vincent. Those are now at a stage where we're reaping the benefits from it. We would recognize as well that there's really no need as such to bring in bananas and plantains in Montserrat. Local farmers have been doing a wonderful job on tomatoes, a lot of the cole crops. So the production is going up. And rather than tying in too much in terms of going into agriculture, I can promise you that the Honourable Easton Taylor Farrell will in fact come in and respond more specifically to what's happening in the agricultural sector and in housing. The other element in terms of roads, in terms of farm roads, we had done some farm roads in the Duck Pond area. That's during Dr. Lewis' time when I was Minister. But in the Dick Hill area, 10 days ago when I left, they were just about tendering. So I suspect that the work will be progressed very shortly in terms of the rebuilding of the Dick Hill Road. One of the things which we need to understand on the Dick Hill Road is that it is the single road in the area. So you can't have people driving up and down the road while you're doing the construction. And we're not in a position to find an alternate means. So therefore, there had to be discussions with the people in the community, including the farming community, as to how they will handle the road rebuilding. As a couple of the persons in the area said, if we have to walk for 3 months, park our cars at the bottom and walk home, we'll do that for the 3-month period because we need the road. There's a commitment from CDB to fund it. Government of Montserrat has made its contribution to the project, and it's a project that will be delivered this year. So it means that the farmers at the top will then have a much better surface going up, and the people living on that farm road will then be in a position also to benefit from a much better road.
Indeed. Speaking to the Honourable Premier of Montserrat, Mr. Reuben Meade. Mr. Meade, I want to go back to the MOU. And I've got a question. It says, so Mr. Premier, you went to Spain and signed an MOU that has not yet been approved by the Cabinet of Montserrat? ?
No, let us understand, again, it's process. You have to first sign not a formal MOU. These are the terms which we're agreeing to take forward in terms of a formal MOU. So you're signing an understanding, a memorandum of understanding, so to speak. No, I'm using memorandum of understanding injudiciously because that's MOU. You're signing the framework agreement. Let's use that for want of a better word. That these are the areas which we will formalize when we go into the formal signing. So the discussions there dealt with the areas that we will put into that formal document. In the case of the one in the United Kingdom, in Hertfordshire, that is one which has been going back and forth since December last year, where, yes, we had agreed some things while we were in Hertfordshire. They did the revisiting of them. They tailored some things, we tailored some things, until we had one which was mutually acceptable to both of us. It then went to our cabinet, it went to their council, and then we had the formal signing. We have not had a formal signing of an MOU with Montserrat in Spain, but we have a heads of agreement which will then be transposed into a formal MOU which will be approved by the cabinet. Okay, so it's a work in progress, but you have to sign something that you're agreeing to take forward.
So the question again comes in. So the understanding you have signed is between you personally and Spain, and now you have to consult with your colleagues?
Clearly, that's a question coming from somebody who doesn't understand how government works. I must be mandated as Premier to be able to go out and have discussions and have heads of agreements. If I need to be able to call back home and say, guys, I need permission to agree something, fire me. I'm not entitled to be in position. As the Premier of Montserrat, I have meetings with investors, I have meetings with heads of governments. They want to have an agreement. And I will simply say, yes, these are areas that we think we can take forward to formalize. I'll sign off on it. It then comes back into the legal process, because there's a difference between a gentleman's agreement and an understanding to take something forward and a legal agreement. When it comes back to cabinet, and cabinet has given me the authority to sign a document that the Attorney General has agreed, yes, this is acceptable to us from a legal standpoint, then I have the formal authority of the cabinet to say, here is a legal agreement which is being signed between Government of Montserrat and investor and so forth and so on. And I just want to touch on that a little, because there are persons who have the view that as Premier you should not have authority to discuss anything unless your colleagues have agreed it. That if life is going to work that way, then we have the wrong set of people in government. Let's take, for example, the discussions in Dubai. I clearly cannot know what the people in Dubai are willing to put on the table. So sitting with the directors in Dubai, they're saying, here are some things that we'd like to put on the table. Are you willing to accept? Yes, we're accepting that in principle. This is what you want to do. Yes, we're accepting in principle. Could we initial here so that we can take it forward formally? Because they will need something for their records and we'll need something for records. And then once we have reached a stage now where we can have a formal agreement, then you come back to the government and you sign off a formal agreement. So it's a stage process. But nobody should expect that a Premier or Minister of Government cannot go overseas and cut a deal and then wait to have it formalized. The whole thing here is that my cabinet colleagues must be in a position to say, look, we trust this guy to be able to go and negotiate on our behalf. In like manner, if the Minister for Health is going off or Minister Kernan is going off, they have the authority to agree certain things in principle and then be able to then have a cabinet ratification of their decisions.
I've got a very interesting question that I want to share with you. Earlier, Mr. Premier, you stated that Dubai Post are waiting, that sports are waiting to see who will form the next government. But before they make a final investment decision on the port, in the same breath, you mentioned that your MCAP government needs 5 more years to continue the work you've started. So, are you saying that if MCAP is not in power, that the port investment will not likely proceed?
No. Sometimes it's important for persons to really listen and take some of their own misconceived views out of the picture. Let's take, for example, a major investment which was signed off in Antigua 2 days after government came into office. Basically, what was happening is an investor is saying, I don't know whether or not the policies that you are carrying out will be carried forward by a new government. And therefore, because you're this close to an election, we will wait until after the election to sign a formal agreement. It does not necessarily mean that they will not sign with an alternate government, but then it's for the alternate government to determine, yes, the agreement which you have, we can live with it, and therefore we will sign off on the agreement. One of the things that's important also is that when you have reached a certain stage in a negotiation, remember, once a set of people are gone, you may need now to go ahead and start the renegotiation process. So I'm not saying that it will not happen. I'm just saying let us be very careful, because the trust and the belief that one set of investors have with one government, it may not necessarily be the same with the other government. Let's also look at, let's take, for example, DFID. DFID at the ministerial level then becomes a very difficult transition arrangement. After the summer break in the United Kingdom, Parliament reopens in September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. 8 months until election. Do you not expect, since the election date in the United Kingdom has already been set, that your ministers are now not going to be out there saying, we are now on the election trail and we don't have time to deal with having new talks with you, because they have to also look at their political survival. And therefore, their focus will, to a great extent, be on their own domestic politics. Because we are trying to tie up a whole range of things in terms of funding arrangements by a certain time, then the technicians would already have a steer in terms of where the government of Montserrat is going and what the agreements they have with the current government. So therefore, post-September, if a new government comes in place, then they will now have to go back up and renegotiate a range of the understandings which they have if they disagree with them. So, for example, issues in relation to welfare, if a new government decides, okay, yes, we're going to increase welfare by 100%, they now have to go back to the United Kingdom to renegotiate that. If they want to change the approach that government has been doing things, they have to go back and renegotiate it. In effect, if something is working, why change what's working? Simply because somebody is saying, look, I may have a better idea. Because at this particular point, I have not heard of any new policy initiatives or any new policy directives that any alternatives are saying to the people of Montserrat. Elections have been announced. 2 months away from election, you still cannot hear what the policies are of any future government to come in other than the MCAP government. Because we have enunciated very clearly what our policies are. We're still waiting to hear from others. Yes, it's all well and good to say, oh, we don't like the way they're doing this, we don't like the way they're doing that, this is what we're going to do. But what are the policy initiatives that you're putting forward? And we're still waiting on.
Indeed. I've got this question to ask you, because I do know personally of some people who want to invest in this country. And my question, Honourable Premier, is that why is it that sometimes people who really show interest and really want to invest in this country, why is it that some people, maybe find it hard to really get their foot on the ground here on Montserrat?
No, but you see, part of it, and as I've indicated, Montserrat is a very difficult country to run. Let's not hold any bones about that. Because when people are not seeing the bigger picture, in other words, I am a senior civil servant. I'm responsible for a particular development. But you find every stumbling block to put in the way of an investor, because this is the way you think in terms of a civil servant. One of the reasons why we have created 2 institutions, one, the Project Implementation Unit, and the MDC, is because you want a more private sector approach, so that a foreign investor or any investor, rather than having to go through the whole government system, which could be very frustrating, here it is, an organization that can hold your hand and ensure that the development takes place. And it is one of the things that we have to be pushing. Now, the question is, and I think it's a question that a lot of people need to get out of their minds. They're asking the question, why is it that the people in MDC are being paid the kind of money they're being paid? Let us stop looking at other people's pockets. Are they providing what they are asked to provide? Are they also not principally Montserratians who are being employed? When we had the non-nationals employed at MDC, making tons and tons of money, nobody made a fuss about it. But as soon as you put Montserratians in place, and they're getting things done, you start questioning, oh, why Basil making so much money down there, and why so-and-so making money down there? They don't even support the government, and you look out for them. They are, in fact, Montserratians. They are people with Montserrat connections who are, in fact, trying their very best to make sure that we can get developments here in Montserrat. And if that is what DFID is willing to put towards their pay packet, so be it.
I'm happy that you touched that, because a question came in and it says, Mr. Premier, why did you give away our future major tourist attraction, a modern-day Pompeii, by allowing a company and its unregulated employees to cause a man-made devastation of our abandoned capital, Plymouth?
Don't understand the question.
Well, I think that they're actually talking about...
the scrap metal business? Yeah. In 2008, thereabouts, 2008, early 2009, we went through a process of picking up quite a number of the derelict vehicles across Montserrat. We stored all of those derelict vehicles just across from Public Works, the site at which the abattoir is now being built. Clearly, one of the understandings and undertakings there was, let us get that metal off Montserrat, because people can make money, people can do business. It creates employment opportunities. One company from St. Kitts came in. We signed an agreement with them to take that out, along with taking metal from government buildings and government properties in Montserrat on the specific terms and conditions. One, they must satisfy the conditions as established by NDPRAC. That's the body that looks after the management of the zone. They had to put in place a work plan that was satisfactory to the DMCA. They had to meet all of the criteria, and then they were permitted to go in. Let's take, for example, the Delta tanks. The Delta tanks were taken down by Montserratians, by a Montserrat company, with the full concurrence of Delta. So Delta is saying, yes, here is scrap metal inside here. You'd like to have our tanks? Go ahead and help yourself. When I took the president of Delta in, along with the regional general manager, they were actually there when guys were on their site taking down and cutting up those tanks with the full concurrence of Delta. Now, are we to say that some of these things which are there, that people can make an income from it? Now, people are talking about the destruction of Pompeii and the major elements within Plymouth. I have been in there with visitors, and I have not seen that level of destruction or damage which people are talking about. The second element, and since we're going to go on to it, let's deal with it frontally. There was also a member of parliament who illegally went in and took out metal from government buildings in Plymouth and used his parliamentary privilege to ship to at least one container load of metal out of Montserrat without appropriate permissions. In some jurisdictions, that would be called theft. We left it alone. Are we saying because we have an old shirt in your closet and you don't want it, that you don't want anybody else to get it, so you prefer it to stay in your closet and rotten? We're saying no. Here are persons who are finding a means of earning employment. If we look at the pile of derelict vehicles, you're seeing that the pile of derelict vehicles, they've been cut up and they've been utilized and have been shipped. They're just looking for some additional material which they can ship. And they have government's blessing to do it. And they are earning money for Montserrat because the money comes back into Montserrat. And we're also doing two things. We're getting rid of our derelict vehicles that have been parked on the sides of the street. And we need to get more of those derelict vehicles off the sides of the street. So therefore, from my standpoint, the government of Montserrat has made a judicious decision to allow that to happen on the controlled environment, and it will continue. As it relates to those who are operating in the zone without permissions, that is for the police to deal with. Because the ones who have permission get their keys from the police to go in, but there are clearly others who have been exporting without permission. The other element is that we have also indicated to customs and the port that when people are shipping metal out of Montserrat, that they must provide a certificate to show that that metal has been legally harvested and that they have the requisite permissions. So therefore, that arm of government must also do its job.
Mr. Premier, here comes another interesting thought, and it says, how come, sir, that you have not produced for the leader of the opposition the cabinet paper that approved this metal removal from the unsafe zone? Why did the leader of the opposition have to write to the governor to get your office to release this cabinet paper? Is there in fact a cabinet paper, Mr. Premier?
Okay, let's understand a couple of things. There are some people in Montserrat who believe that the governor is Lord Almighty. And therefore, if you wish to go to the governor for the governor to instruct me to do something, it's not going to happen. If the leader of the opposition wants me to provide something for him, it is for him to come to me to ask me for it. Now, in relation to the disclosure of cabinet papers and cabinet decisions, there is a process for the disclosure of cabinet papers and cabinet. I also want to add that if the leader of the opposition wish to have specific cabinet decisions published, then let's publish the one that is relating to his business and his business ventures and the decisions that cabinet made in relation to that. We have to be very careful, because when you start saying publish cabinet decisions, there are some personal business decisions which should not be made public. If, for example, you have an issue and government has to deal with it, should we now go out and publish that Basil got this from government because Basil had a problem? No. You would expect that business must be kept confidential in some respects. There are some cabinet decisions which are published because they're public information. The ones that require SRNOs are tabled in the Legislative Assembly and are public documents and published in the Gazette online. So those are all available. So for those who wish to now go out there to say, I had no authority to sign the agreement to allow persons to go in, the government of Montserrat gave concessions to those persons for bringing in a range of equipment to go in on the basis of that letter. So yes, there was, from a cabinet standpoint, a decision in relation to that paper. And that documentation is in an SRNO in the Legislative Assembly and can be found there. It is not for me to go and find SRNOs for the leader of the opposition.
So there is a cabinet paper for the metal removal?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so it's just about a minute on 10 o'clock. I'm going to ask you this final question, Mr. Premier. And what is your relationship right now with DFID? And I wanted to tie that in because, you know, it has been suggested that your relation right now is a bit rocky, and this stems from when you gave this bonus. Okay. I want you to tie that in.
Let me deal with it.
Okay.
I am the Premier of Montserrat and not anybody's little boy. I made a commitment to the public servants that if in fact that they performed well over the last financial year, whatever savings that government of Montserrat made would be shared with them. I raised the issue in East Kilbride, directly in East Kilbride, and we have a difference of opinion amongst economists, where one economist up there is saying, but you could have done it another way. I'm saying, as the Minister of Finance and leader of government business, that's a decision I'm taking. We have a disagreement on that element of it. But outside of that, the other 99.9% of the MOU is agreed without question. Yes, the MOU which they submitted to us I had some very personal issues in terms of the language. And we responded to them that we will not sign the MOU until they tailor the language. The language has been tailored. The additional funds have been provided to the government of Montserrat, and we expect that a supplementary appropriation bill to fund the additional monies that have been agreed in the MOU will be tabled in the Legislative Assembly. So if you're having a disagreement, as we're saying, you can't just bend over and somebody else start pulling your strings. You must be able to fight back and say, sorry, we're not accepting certain things. As I said to the DFID head on the fringe of the meeting with the minister, there are certain things which you had in the original MOU. And if it is going to be an insistence of DFID that you're going to go that approach, the government of Montserrat will refuse your money. How are you going to say to a government of Montserrat that you want to put down the parliament buildings and some of the buildings, but it must go to an international contractor? What are we saying to the people of Montserrat? That the contractors who have built the Social Security building, Government Headquarters building, the Ministry of Communications and Works building, pretty much all the buildings in Montserrat, are not good enough for you? I, as long as I'm Premier of Montserrat, will not allow DFID or anybody else to create in the minds of people of Montserrat that they will send foreign contractors in here to build anything that locals can build, or to design something that local architects can design. It will not happen. And if somebody else wishes to accept that, then let them come in and accept it. But I'm simply saying, you're asking me to represent you as the people of Montserrat. Behind closed doors, yes, we'll cuss and we'll argue. But we still go out and we have our discussions and we come to agreements. That is what negotiation about, not accepting the first thing that's thrown at you. This government has been strong enough to say to DFID, we're accepting this or we're not accepting that. We don't agree with these terms, let's talk. And we have developed that relationship to the extent that I'm able to pick up the phone, call the minister for DFID. We set up a quick meeting. We go up, we schedule the meeting. We continue to have our regular dialogues. We pick up the phone and talk. Ask Dr. Lewis how many times that he has been in a position to pick up the phone and call a DFID minister or call a Foreign Office minister. We have developed a relationship up to the level of Secretary of State that Montserrat's status within the overseas territories is at an all-time high. And they rely on the leadership of the government of Montserrat to do things. So let's take, for example, the meeting in Cayman Islands. The meeting in Cayman Islands was scheduled for September. As I said to them, if it's September, you know, Montserrat will not be participating. And they're saying, and I'm simply saying to them, go ahead and have the meeting without Montserrat. And they're saying, absolutely not. Montserrat is such a critical element in terms of the leadership of this group that we will move the meeting to July to facilitate you so that we don't get involved in your election process. When I'm on my way to the United Kingdom, I had no meetings with the Foreign Office. And the Foreign Office is saying, we would like to have a discussion with you. We want to have a discussion with you. And I simply said to them at the meeting, I find it rather strange that you're hunting me down to have a meeting with me when I only came here to speak with DFID. Their position was, we respect your views and opinions. We want to hear the approach that you'd like to see us take in relation to a range of matters as it relates to the overseas territories and in the Joint Ministerial Council. So that when you go to the JMC pre-meeting in Cayman Islands, that at least we expect to hear from you within 2 weeks in terms of where do we go for the next Joint Ministerial Council to be held in either December or January. People will see certain things, and I'm absolutely certain, Basil, that that question is coming from a senior civil servant. Absolutely certain. There's no question about it. So when you're looking now at senior civil servants seeing documentation in draft, and then taking that documentation and saying, yo, we catch them now. We're simply saying, yes, you've seen the documentation in draft, but you do not know what discussions that we're having on a one-on-one basis, and therefore you must now wait for the final documentation so that at least you see the understandings that are there. And this is one of the things in relation to government. There's no confidentiality. So when people are saying they want document and we're not providing it. They have their own supporters within government for their own range of reasons who attend their meetings, bad talk government. But we understand how things are going. It's open and transparent government, and people are free to talk and support who they wish. In closing, one of the things that we have to look at is, where are we in Montserrat in relation to our development plans? Just visited the site in Little Bay where the guys are filling in the other section of Piper's Pond. That's coming along nicely. One of the things that's happening there, and I think people in amazement don't look at it, is that there are a range of truck drivers, excavator operators, etc., etc. So you're looking at maybe 25, 30, 40 persons who are directly or indirectly involved on that project, people at work. When you're looking at the housing developments and the way we're doing housing developments, in former years, you're in a position to say, Basil is a contractor and he supports the government of Montserrat. He supports a party. He's a good party supporter. So we have to give Basil a job. But you sitting over here, you're not a good supporter. You don't get work. What we're saying is, every job in government is openly tendered, which means I don't care who you support and who you don't support. As long as you provide the best value for money to government through an open and public tendering system, then the job is yours. Importantly, you are a Montserratian, irrespective of who you support, and you have a right to live in your own country. People are saying as well, but you're always talking about the world economic situation, etc., etc. Remember when we started the cigarette factory? That people are saying, they're bringing in cigarette and killing people, and cigarette kill people. 25 people employed in the cigarette factory. The important consideration here, Montserrat is not an attractive investment island, given its limitations. And therefore, as we say to people, if you have a clean table, absolutely clean table, disinfected, you will not find any ants on it. Put a little piece of honey on it, and you'll find that ants start finding the table attractive. The cigarette factory, what other companies are saying, if they are seeing something here where they're willing to invest, then perhaps Montserrat could be an investment possibility for us. The people in Dubai who are saying, let us take a chance with Montserrat, are also saying others will follow us. And this is how you're looking at developing a country. You have to be firm in relation to policies. You have to look at what's happening in the international environment, because it will impact on you. And also, and as I say it at the regional level, I say it at DFID level, I say it in government, I say it publicly. I will not make a decision which is exclusively a political decision if it's not a decision which is in the best interest of Montserrat. Every decision we make, if it's the first and foremost, is it a good decision for Montserrat? Yes. Is it a bad decision politically? If it's yes, so be it. Montserrat benefits. And it is for the people of Montserrat to make a determination on September 12th which team it is they want to lead them. I'm not going to have any grief if on the 13th I have to go back and polish up my construction boots and go back out there to do construction work or whatever it is. It is the will of the people, and we must abide by the will of the people, whichever way it goes. So don't be frightened as to whether or not you're going to be in or out. Continue doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. We're being paid to do the work, and we will, in fact, focus on delivering the work for the people of Montserrat until such time when they say, we want to have somebody else. They will determine sooner or later whether the others are better or not.
I got a final question for you, very quickly. Following on from your reference to the MDC salaries and performance, are you saying that the civil servants and government officers are not providing what they've been asked to provide? Why not pay the civil servants more money, if your premise is correct?
Okay, let's understand certain things. The public service is being funded by taxes and being funded under a different arrangement to the MDC. The MDC is currently being funded under a DFID project, so it's a project and project financed. The funding and the salary scales that have been approved for DFID are part of the business case for the MDC. The financing is, I think, for a 3-year period. Once the 3-year period is up, MDC has to finance itself. So which is one of the reasons why they're looking at the investors coming in and they're working judiciously. Despite the fact that MDC reports to me as the reporting minister, I do not get involved in day-to-day operations and salary scales and so forth. And I want to close this off this way. And it's a parable of the harvesting of the grapes, where somebody came in at 9 o'clock or at 6 o'clock. And the farmer said, I'm going to pay you $10. Somebody came in at 10 o'clock and they offered them the same $10. The person who came in at 3 o'clock, he offered them the $10. You agreed to accept $10 at 6 o'clock. Why are you going to be worried that the person who came in at 4 o'clock is earning differently? It's an agreement which you have. Within the public service in Montserrat, and people say I beat up on the public service in Montserrat, I don't. I just say it the way I see it. The public service in Montserrat, in the main, does very good work. Absolutely good work. But there are still some people in the public service who are going to spend their time on the internet, spend their time doing private business, turn up at 9 o'clock and leave at 3 o'clock, don't do the work and still yarn and say government of Montserrat is killing them because they're not making enough money. If you put in the effort, the government of Montserrat will prosper. And if the government of Montserrat will prosper, then everybody in Montserrat prospers. We must not see civil servants as being different from the private sector workers. A private sector worker can operate on 100 units of currency because that is what the private sector can pay them. A same Montserratian in government is possibly earning 130 units of currency. And they're saying they can't survive on the 130 units of currency. But their brothers and sisters who are working in the private sector must survive on less. And therefore you must increase civil servants' pay and increase civil service terms and conditions when in fact the private sector people are suffering. But the private sector people are also part of your economy and part of your society. And you also have to look at the carrying capacity of government. Now let's take, for example, on the restructuring of government. We have an understanding with the British government that our numbers must remain at a particular level. And practically every department of government comes in their review by the person who is doing the review, who is saying, we need more staff and you need more money. And you're simply saying, clearly you're not reading the financing agreements which we have. So therefore, find a different way of doing it. Look at things that are priority and things that are not priority. And focus on the priority ones and drop the ones that are no longer priority. So you're saving government money. And in saving government money, you can provide more of the services that are required. But people like to hold on. Look, I have 100 units of currency and I have 10 staff. Despite the fact that I can reallocate and reassign staff, I need to have more staff because it gives me more power. And we're saying, no, let us look more judiciously at how you treat staff. Senior management must treat staff with absolute respect. And junior staff must treat senior management with respect. We cannot have people feeling that they can do whatever they like within government because government can't do them nothing. It is our country. Together, we will build this country. Together. Now, people will say, but it's election time, boy, you can't say them kind of things. As I say to people, I say it the way I see it. If you're a worker within government and you're not doing good work, why is it that I must tap you on your back because you're a supporter and say, good work, Basil? No, you must step up to the plate. If you support the government, put in the extra effort so that others can say, look, this is an MCAP supporter and they're working hard, so we're going to work hard too. So that we build this country. Don't expect that the British government will just be there handing you money hand over fist. They have their own issues in the United Kingdom, and we therefore have to, like offshore medical schools and so forth, we have to find a means of getting the offshore medical schools up and running because that is going to provide additional funding for people of Montserrat. So we also have to look at how we do things within government of Montserrat. And also to satisfy, we have to work very hard at satisfying the timelines that has been established by the funding agencies. Because if you don't satisfy the timelines, you're less likely to get the additional resources. So Basil, thanks very much.
Indeed.
It has been a long time, but I'll be back and we'll continue these discussions. It's, again, as I said, you do good work here, and I keep commending you for the good work and the initiatives you have taken. but we also have to ensure that others follow and continue to do good work, because it is all for the development of Montserrat and the people of Montserrat. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honourable Premier of Montserrat. Thank you so much.
You've just been listening to a recording of a live interview on ZJB Radio Tuesday, the 24th of June, in which ZJB's senior announcer, Basil Chambers, interviewed the Premier of Montserrat, Mr. Reuben T. Meade.
We're doing something about it.
Broadcasting with you in mind, Montserrat, this is ZJB Radio.